the Religious Education Assistant at the First Unitarian Church of Salt Lake City. Thank you for joining me to learn more about our newest UU of the week, Viola Liuzzo. She was a housewife, a civil rights activist, and a Unitarian Universalist. Viola was born in 1925 in California, Pennsylvania. Her family struggled to make ends meet, and it only got harder during the Great Depression. They moved around the country looking for work, including parts of the South. Even though Viola was white, she saw segregation and Jim Crow laws firsthand and was deeply affected by them. Viola eventually settled in Detroit, Michigan, where she had 5 children. Her best friend was an African-American woman named Sarah Evans. Her friendship and Viola's experiences growing up inspired her to become very active in the fight for civil rights. Viola joined the First Unitarian Church of Detroit in 1964, and then also joined the NAACP, or the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Viola was active in Detroit, where she both organized and attended protests. So in 1965, when Martin Luther King Jr. called people to join the fight in Selma, Alabama, Viola decided to go. She left her children to be cared for in Detroit and drove for days before she reached Alabama. Now, even though the laws say that every American citizen over the age of 18 has the right to vote, it's not always true. Historically, and even still today, African American people were denied the right to vote by unfair tactics like poll taxes, literacy tests, and just general bureaucracy, like not having enough polling stations or only having the voter registration office open for a limited time. These things happen the most in areas where most of the people living there were African American. And protests happened for years, trying in an attempt to bring attention to this injustice. But President Lyndon B. Johnson was not willing to get involved. In February and March of 1965, leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. and John Lewis organized a march that would start in Selma, Alabama, and end in Montgomery. In Selma, less than 2% of the African Americans living there were able to register to vote, so they had more than enough cause to stage a protest in Selma. But the march was stopped multiple times by violence from both the police and a deputized posse of what was basically a bunch of white supremacists. The first march they attempted ended in an attack so violent it was later called Bloody Sunday. Viola was horrified by what happened in Selma, so when she heard Martin Luther King's call to action, she joined thousands of other supporters and went to Alabama. For days on end, Viola drove marchers back and forth from the camp to the march and from the airport and back. And after the third march from Selma to Montgomery, Viola was driving a fellow protester back to the camp when she was attacked and killed by the Ku Klux Klan. They were angry that a white woman and a black man were working together and driving in the same car. Over several weeks of protests in and near Selma, Alabama, hundreds of protesters were injured and 4 people were killed in the fight for civil rights. 2 of the 4 were Unitarian Universalists. One was Viola and the other was the Reverend James Grebe. Viola's husband received a call from President Johnson the day after she died. The president said, "I don't think she died in vain because this is going to be a battle, all out as far as I'm concerned." Jim told the president, "My wife died for a sacred battle, the rights of humanity. She had one concern and only one in mind. She took a quote from Abraham Lincoln that all men are created equal, and that's the way she believed." President Johnson was finally ready to act. In 1965, the NAACP held a memorial for Viola back in Detroit, which was attended by more than 1,500 people, including Martin Luther King Jr. and Rosa Parks. Viola's African-American friend Sarah Evans took on the permanent care of her 5 children, and Viola's commitment to change and her sacrifice, along with all of the protesters' work in Selma, paved the way for the Voting Rights Act of 1965. The law put an end to poll taxes and ensured that more Americans could register to vote regardless of race or the neighborhood they lived in. Thank you for joining me for this challenging edition of UU of the Week. Be sure to check out uuoftheweek.org to learn about more influential Unitarian Universalists.